to the part about castle. Famous games that were won and lost because of lack of castling. Exhibit A is another masterpiece by Paul Morphy, the best player of his generation. 1858 this game was played. His opponent was Duke of Brunswick. I'm not sure, there's no picture, well, picture is a strong word, so there's no illustration to that player. Let's see what happens if you delay castle. E4, E5, people knew that these were good moves at the time. Knight F3, and already the first move played by Duke of Brunswick was D6. This is not a good move. A better move is Knight C6, it develops the knight, and then you can develop the knight to F6, you can see the arrows, the bishop goes to E7 or C5, and black castles quickly. Another alternative is Knight to F6, which is Petrov, but it requires a little bit of sharpness. You cannot take immediately on E4, you have to kick the knight away, and then take, and then you do bishop E7 and castle as fast as possible. D6 is already, in my point of view, not a very good move. White goes D4, fights for the center, and black plays bishop G4, another inaccuracy. This is not a good way to handle a threat from your opponent by using tricks and tactics. That can backfire. It can backfire, you may miscalculate something. It is better to deal with it in more straightforward fashion. You just take the pawn, white would take with the queen or knight, and then you quickly go, let's say white takes with the knight. Quickly Knight F6, Knight C3, very quickly Bishop E7, the next move castle, and you're like, whew, at least my king is castled, I have two minor pieces in the game, yeah, I don't have any pawns in the center, I should fix that as soon as I get a chance. Instead, black goes bishop G4. That does not make his castle closer. White takes the pawn on E5, immediately huge problems. Took the pawn, if you don't want to lose material, you have to take the knight, because if you take the pawn in the center, suddenly D file got opened, queen takes queen, king takes queen, and now knight on F3, which was pinned a second ago, knight takes E5, takes the pawn and attacks the bishop and the pawn, white is winning material. That's what happens if you try to solve your problems using tactics. Very often you miscalculate. You have to take, Paul Morphy takes with the queen, pawn takes to E5. What do we have now? Bishop goes to C4, develops with a tempo, immediately attacks the pawn here. The downside to developing this bishop early, so this is we're reaching more sophisticated area. Whenever black is developing that bishop, well, the same could be said about white. What white does have a tempo ahead, so white can afford more in the opening. The bishop left, the pawn on B7 is left undefended. The pawn on B7 is left undefended. So black covers from the mate and develops the knight. Too late. Queen B3, double attack. Double attack. If that bishop was in the starting position, or if black was castled, the pawn on F7 wouldn't be a problem. It's too late. Black is already lost as early as move 7. So what do? Queen E7. Protecting the pawn on F7 with a hope that white, if white takes that pawn, it seems like the rook is lost, but what Duke of Brunswick prepared was Queen B4 check. Queen takes B4, necessary, because that was a bishop takes B4, and at least black reaches the endgame. Yes, black did lose a pawn, yes, white has two bishops, yes, white is winning, but at least the game is not over yet. Instead, Paul Morphy goes knight to C3. He says, I don't need your pawns yet, I need to develop my knight. So the pawn on B7 is hanging, so what does black do? Black plays C6, that looks like a good move to play. Queen protects the pawn and stops this knight. That looks good. The problem, however, is it in no way helps you develop pieces. In fact, it is harder to develop pieces. Knight should go to C6, as I pointed out earlier in this course. So white develops the bishop. Where do you develop the bishop? Why did white go knight C3? Because I told you that's the best place for the knight. It is ready to jump here, here, supports the pawn, aims towards the center. So now white had to decide what to do with this guy. The bishop on C1 is standing. Where is a good place for that bishop? You have three options. F4 is taken. Bishop d2, too passive, not attacking the center. e3, decent, but not attacking anything important, although pawn on a7, arguably a target. Bishop to g5, that's a great move. Pinning the knight, and that's a very active place for a bishop. Black goes b5. It's really hard to give any suggestions to black. You cannot develop the knight because I take the pawn. If you develop the knight here, you should always take into account that I can take it and ruin all the pawns, and these pawns would be lost after something like queen c4. It's really hard to protect all of them, and I'm not even forced to capture. This bishop is not going anywhere. The king has no way to castle. Black has already what is called strategically lost here. So black tries b5 to kick the bishop to free the queen. So if bishop were to move, I'm guessing black would move the queen, let's say if bishop moves to a passive place, black would probably go queen b4, trap the queen, trap is a strong word, trap the queen for an exchange, and then you would say, phew, at least my king would be safe. With queens off the board, you shouldn't bother about king safety that much. But Paul anticipated everything here and took that pawn. White could afford to make this sacrifice, a knight for 2 pawns, which is giving up a whole pawn. White can only afford it because white is better developed. Check it out. Queen and 2 bishops are already really well developed. Black developed only knight, and I wouldn't say the queen is developed, it's actually in the way, so the queen is misplaced. The king is completely in the center. White can castle any moment now. So black pins himself with knight d7. And white completes the development with lone castle. There's an absolute pin here, relative pin here, the rook is in the game, the queen is in the game is over. Black tries rook d8 to hold it together, but I cannot even see a scenario where black can complete the development. And now a crushing defeat comes from Paul Morphy. It was only possible because black's king is stuck in the center. If that king was on g8, we would not have seen this one happening. Rook takes d7. That bishop is so valuable because it's pinning that rook takes d7, rook takes d7. Again, there's pin here, there's pin here, so black couldn't take with the knight. And now rook goes to d1. All white's pieces are in the attack. White is full rook down for just 2 pawns, although nobody cares about the pawns at this stage. And there's no way this knight on f6 would be taken any moment, and rook on d7 is lost. Again, only because black did not castle, because black chose dubious moves that do not bring castle closer. d6 move, the castle is not any moment closer. Bishop to g4 move, the castle is not approaching. And black should have at least given up some material, and already after move 3 black is in huge trouble or maybe lost. That's the problem. Queen went to e6, please take my queen, I want to exchange some pieces. No. Bishop takes d7 check, knight takes d7, white gains some material back, and now since his king is stuck in the center, brilliant combination by Paul Morphy. Queen b8 check, knight b8, and again, only 2 pieces left. Just like in previous examples, 2-3 pieces left on the board, they get to that king that was stuck in the center or under crushing attack. This would never have happened if black developed his bishop from f8 and castled. Black did put a pawn in the center, but black did not castle. That's the main reason why this masterpiece is now available to all of us to enjoy and learn from. Paul Morphy played a perfect game. This is how you should be playing if you're ahead in development. You shouldn't be scared of sacrificing material, assuming your opponent's king stays in the center.